The supermarket's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the tiled floor, where Jamila Harris, a 32-year-old Black American woman, pushed a damp mop. The air carried the sour tang of overripe fruit, mixed with the sharp bite of cleaning detergent, a scent that clung to her worn uniform. Her hands, rough from years of scrubbing, ached as she pressed the mop against a stubborn stain near the canned goods section. Each stroke was deliberate, her focus unbroken despite the fatigue settling into her shoulders. Jamila's dark skin glistened with a faint sheen of sweat, her braided hair tucked neatly under a faded cap. She moved with quiet purpose, invisible to the shoppers who stepped around her, their eyes fixed on shelves stocked with bright labels. Jamila's life revolved around her family, her 6-year-old son Malik, whose bright eyes lit up their small, weathered home, and her 68-year-old grandmother Esther, whose arthritis made every day a struggle. This janitorial job at Carter's Market was their lifeline, paying for Malik's asthma medicine and the bills that kept their peeling house standing. But the work came with a cost. Co-workers rarely spoke to her, their glances sliding past as if she were part of the scenery. Customers, too, treated her as a fixture, their carts swerving without acknowledgement. The isolation stung, rooted in the subtle racial biases of the small town and her low-status role. Jamila had learned to swallow the hurt, focusing instead on her family's needs. She couldn't afford to falter. As she squeezed the mop into a bucket of murky water, a figure caught her eye at the far end of the aisle. Nathan Carter, a 40-year-old white American man and the supermarket's owner, stood near a display of cereal boxes. His light skin contrasted with his neatly pressed shirt, and his expensive boots gleamed under the store's lights. Nathan, a millionaire farmer who owned vast fields outside town, was a rare presence in the store, his visits brief and quiet. He stood tall, his blue eyes fixed on Jamila with an intensity that made her pause. She recognized him from his occasional walkthroughs, always silent, always observing. Why was he watching her now? Her stomach tightened, but she forced herself to focus on the tiles, her mop moving faster. Jamila's life hadn't always been this constrained. She'd once dreamed of studying horticulture, inspired by Esther's tales of tending crops in her youth. But those dreams had faded when Malik was born, and her ex left without a word. Now every penny went to her family, her small backyard garden, her only outlet for those old ambitions. She grew corn and herbs, selling what she could at the local market for extra cash. It wasn't much, but it was hers. As she worked, her mind drifted to Malik's latest drawing, a colorful scribble of a farm he wanted to visit someday. She smiled faintly, then pushed the thought aside. Dreams could wait. Survival couldn't. Nathan shifted, stepping closer to the cereal display but still watching. Jamila kept her head down, avoiding his gaze. She didn't need trouble when her manager, Mr. Thompson, was always quick to criticize. As if on cue, Thompson's sharp voice cut through the hum of the store. "Jamila," he barked, clutching a clipboard as he approached from behind a stack of canned peaches. At 50, his balding head and cheap tie gave him a perpetually sour look. "You're too slow today. Finish this aisle and get to the produce section. Sticky floors are piling up complaints." Jamila nodded, her voice steady despite the sting. "Yes, Mr. Thompson." He scowled, muttering about shipments, and walked off. Jamila exhaled, her pride bruised but intact. Complaining changed nothing. She'd learned that long ago. She moved to the produce section where a spilled box of apples had left a sticky mess. Kneeling, she scrubbed her knees, pressing into the hard tile. A couple of customers stepped around her, their chatter fading as they ignored her presence. Jamila's thoughts turned to home. Malik's laughter, Esther's quiet strength. She had to finish her shift, get home and cook something simple. Maybe she'd check the garden tonight to see if the corn was ready to sell. Every small sale helped a step toward stability. Nathan lingered near a display of oranges, his gaze still on her. Jamila felt a prickle of unease mixed with curiosity. Why did he care about a janitor's work? He had power, wealth, and a world far removed from hers. Yet his attention felt different today, less distant, more deliberate. She adjusted her grip on the mop, pretending not to notice. The store grew quieter. As closing time neared, the fluorescent hum louder in the stillness. Jamila glanced up, catching Nathan's eye momentarily, before looking away. Her heart beat faster, but she told herself to stay focused. She had a job to do and a family to support. Whatever Nathan's interest meant, she couldn't let it distract her. What do you think of Jamila's strength in the face of invisibility? Comment below and let us know. Your thoughts will keep this story alive. If her resilience moves you, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for the next part of her journey. Will Nathan's attention change her path? Stay tuned to find out. Jamila Harris pushed her cleaning cart down the produce aisle, the wheels squeaking faintly under the weight of her supplies. The supermarket's air felt heavy, thick with the scent of bruised apples and the hum of overhead coolers. She focused on her task, wiping down a freezer door, smudged with fingerprints, her movement steady despite the ache in her wrists. The morning rush had faded, leaving the store quieter, though the weight of her responsibilities, Malik's medicine, Esther's care, the bills piling up, pressed more complex than ever. She kept her head down, avoiding the occasional glance from coworkers who moved past without a word. Their indifference was familiar, a silent barrier she'd learned to navigate. Nathan Carter stood near a stack of oranges, his presence like a shadow at the edge of her vision. He adjusted a crate, his hands deliberate, but his eyes lingered on Jamila. Unlike the other employees who saw her as just another janitor, Nathan noticed the quiet strength in her posture and how she worked through exhaustion without complaint. He'd inherited Carter's market and the family's sprawling farms a decade ago, after his wife's sudden death in a car accident. The loss had left him guarded, pouring energy into his business to fill the void. At 40, he was wealthy but solitary, his days spent overseeing fields rather than managing the store's daily grind. He left that to Mr. Thompson, a decision that gave him freedom, but sometimes disconnected him from his enterprise. Jamila felt his gaze, a prickle of unease stirring in her chest. She wasn't used to attention, especially not from someone like Nathan, someone who could change her life with a word. She wiped the freezer door harder, the cloth squeaking against the glass. Why was he here again? Owners didn't linger in aisles unless something was wrong. Her mind flicked to Malik, who'd woken with a slight cough that morning. She couldn't afford trouble, not when every paycheck was a lifeline. She glanced at Nathan, his neatly pressed shirt and polished boots contrasting with her faded uniform. He caught her eye and offered a slight nod, his expression unreadable. Jamila looked away, her pulse quickening. Nathan took a step closer, his boots clicking softly on the tile. He paused by a display of apples, pretending to inspect them, but his focus remained on Jamila. He'd noticed her for weeks, her diligence, the way she carried herself despite the store's indifference. It reminded him of his late wife, who'd worked tirelessly on their farm before her death. Jamila's resilience stirred something in him, a mix of admiration and curiosity he hadn't felt in years. He cleared his throat, his voice low but clear. "You're always here late," he said, his words cutting through the hum of the store. "It's impressive the way you keep going." Jamila froze, her hand tightening on the cloth. She wasn't sure how to respond. Compliments were rare, and from Nathan they felt loaded. "I do what I have to," she said, her voice even but guarded. She met his gaze briefly, her dark eyes cautious. Nathan nodded, his hands slipping into his pockets. "I respect that," he said. "Not everyone works as hard as you do." His tone was sincere, but the weight of his position hung between them. He owned the store, the farm's everything. She was just a janitor scraping by. Before Jamila could respond, Mr. Thompson's voice sliced through the moment. "Jamila, what's taking so long?" he snapped, striding toward them with his clipboard. His eyes flicked to Nathan, and he straightened his tone, softening slightly. "Mr. Carter didn't see you there." Nathan gave a curt nod, his expression neutral. "Just checking on things," he said, his voice cool. Thompson turned back to Jamila, his scowl returning. "You've got the storage room to reorganize before closing. Move it." Jamila nodded, swallowing her frustration. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady. Thompson walked off, leaving a tense silence in his wake. Jamila pushed her cart toward the next aisle, her mind racing. Nathan's words echoed in her head, but didn't change her reality. She had to focus, finish her shift, get home to Malik and Esther, check the garden. But Nathan's attention lingered in her thoughts, a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. He watched her move away, his expression thoughtful. He knew he'd crossed a line speaking to her directly, but something about Jamila drew him in. The storage room door creaked shut behind Jamila Harris as she maneuvered her cleaning cart inside the dim light, casting shadows across stacks of crates and shelves. The air was thick with the scent of cardboard and faint traces of disinfectant, starkly contrasting the supermarket's bustling aisles. Jamila's hands moved swiftly, sorting bottles of cleaning solution, her mind still replaying Nathan Carter's words from earlier. "Not everyone works as hard as you do." His voice, low and deliberate, lingered like an unwelcome guest. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task Mr. Thompson had barked at her to complete before closing. The sooner she finished, the sooner she could get home to Malik and Esther, where the day's wait might ease. Outside the store grew quieter, the hum of fluorescent lights and distant chatter fading as closing time approached. Jamila's shoulders ached, but she kept working, stacking boxes precisely. Her small backyard garden waited at home, a patch of corn and herbs that offered a sliver of hope for extra income. She pictured Malik's smile, his latest drawing pinned to their fridge, and Esther's steady presence, despite her pain. They depended on her, and this job, grueling as it was, kept them afloat. She couldn't afford distractions, especially not from someone like Nathan, whose wealth and authority loomed over her fragile stability. The door creaked again, and Jamila's heart jumped. Nathan stepped inside, his boots soft on the concrete floor. He closed the door behind him, the click echoing in the cramped space. His presence filled the room, crisp cologne cutting through the musty air. Jamila gripped a can of disinfectant, her pulse quickening. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice steady but cautious, unsure how to address him in this private moment. "I'm just finishing up." Nathan's blue eyes studied her, his posture relaxed but intentional. "Am I interrupting?" he asked, his tone low, almost gentle. Jamila set the can on a shelf, her hands clammy. "No, just doing my job." She avoided his gaze, focusing on a crate of soda bottles. Nathan took a step closer, the small space shrinking between them. "I meant what I said earlier," he said, his voice softer now. "I've been watching how you work, how you carry yourself. You're different, Jamila. You don't let this place break you." His words hung in the air, sincere, but heavy with the weight of his position. Jamila's chest tightened. No one had spoken to her like this, not here where she was invisible, but his attention felt like a double-edged sword. "I have to," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My family needs me." Nathan nodded, his expression softening. "I know. I heard about your son and your grandmother. It's not easy carrying that load." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I've been where you are in a way. After my wife passed, I threw myself into the farm and the store. Work was all I had. Seeing you, it reminds me there's strength in keeping going." Jamila's breath caught. His vulnerability surprised her, stirring a flicker of connection. She'd assumed he was untouchable, insulated by wealth. but his words hinted at a shared struggle. The storage room felt sealed off, the muffled sounds of the store distant. Nathan stepped closer now, only inches away, his cologne enveloping her. "You deserve better than this," he said, his voice barely audible. Jamila's heart pounded, her instincts screaming to step back and protect her job and family. But his gaze held her sincere and unguarded. She felt the pull of his words, the warmth of his presence. She wasn't just a janitor for a moment, she was seen. Her lips parted, searching for a response, but none came. Nathan's hand rose slowly, hesitating, then brushed a stray braid from her face. The touch was gentle, electric. Before she could think, Nathan leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a tentative kiss. Jamila froze, the warmth of his breath mingling with hers, tasting faintly of mint. Her mind raced. This was wrong, reckless, but her body didn't pull away. She kissed him back for a moment, letting herself feel something beyond exhaustion and worry. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, the shelves behind her creaking as she leaned back. The kiss deepened, a fleeting escape from their separate worlds, but footsteps outside snapped her back to reality. The door handle rattled. Jamila pushed Nathan away, her heart slamming against her ribs. Two co-workers, a young man and a woman, stood in the doorway, their eyes wide with shock. Sorry," the man stammered, pulling the door shut. Muffled whispers leaked through the wood, sharp and accusing. Jamila's cheeks burned, panic flooding her veins. "They saw us," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This isn't good." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, his face tight. "I'll handle it," he said, his tone firm but strained. "No one will say anything." Jamila shook her head, her hands trembling. "I need this job, Mr. Carter. Don't let them blame me." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I won't. This is on me." He stepped back, giving her space, but the damage was done. Jamila grabbed her cart, her mind a storm of fear and regret. She'd crossed a line and the consequences loomed. Nathan reached for the door, his voice low. "Finish here. I'll make sure you're safe." He left the door, closing softly behind him. Jamila stood alone, the taste of his kiss lingering, her future hanging by a thread. Jamila Harris woke to the gray light of dawn. Her stomach knotted with dread. The memory of the storage room kiss with Nathan Carter clung to her like a damp cloth, its warmth overshadowed by the cold fear of what it might cost her. She checked on Malik, who slept curled under a thin blanket, his breathing steady despite a faint cough. Esther stirred on the couch, her hands stiff from arthritis, offering a quiet nod. Jamila forced a smile, hiding the turmoil that had kept her awake. She slipped on her worn shoes and headed to Carter's Market, the early morning air heavy with the scent of dew and exhaust. The supermarket was quiet before opening, its fluorescent lights flickering to life. Jamila clocked in, her fingers trembling as she swiped her card. She scanned the aisles for Nathan, hoping he'd kept his promise to protect her job, but he was nowhere in sight. Her heart sank. Had he left her to face the consequences alone? She grabbed her cleaning cart, the familiar squeak of its wheels grounding her, and began wiping down shelves. Every sound, the hum of a cooler, the rustle of a co-worker's footsteps, felt like a warning. The whispers from last night's interruption echoed in her mind, sharp and accusing. "Mr. Thompson's voice cut through her thoughts. "Jamila, office, now." His tone was flat, his clipboard tucked under his arm as he strode toward the back of the store. Jamila's throat tightened, but she followed her steps heavy. The office was a cramped, windowless room, cluttered with boxes of old receipts and spare uniforms. Thompson closed the door, his balding head gleaming under the single bulb. He crossed his arms, his eyes hard. "I heard about last night," he said, his voice cold. "Employees saw you with Mr. Carter in the storage room. Inappropriate behavior, Jamila. You know the rules." Jamila's heart pounded, her hands clenching at her sides. "I can explain," she said, her voice shaking. "It wasn't what it looked like. He Thompson raised a hand, cutting her off. I don't want details. You were seen, and that's enough. This store can't afford rumors, especially involving the owner. It looks bad, real bad. His words stung, laced with an unspoken judgment that felt heavier than policy. Jamila sensed the weight of her position. A low-wage janitor, easily replaceable, caught in a scandal with a powerful man. I didn't start it, she said, her voice steadying. I was working. Thompson shook his head. Doesn't matter who started it. You should have stopped it or reported it. Instead, you let it happen. He leaned closer, his voice lowering. Mr. Carter's too crucial for this kind of mess. I run this store to keep things clean and orderly. I can't have employees stirring up trouble. Jamila's fists tightened, anger rising. You think I planned this? I need this job. My son and my grandmother depend on me. Thompson's expression didn't soften. I'm sorry, Jamila, he said, his tone final. You're terminated effective immediately. Gather your things and leave. The words hit like a physical blow. Jamila's knees weakened, but she held herself upright, refusing to crumble. She wanted to argue, to beg, but Thompson's gesture toward the door silenced her. She stepped into the hallway, her mind reeling. Fired just like that. The store's hum felt distant as she walked to the break room, grabbing her jacket and a small bag of personal items. A few co-workers watched from the aisles, their whispers sharp as knives. No one approached. No one offered comfort. The rumors she knew would spread, painting her as the one who crossed a line. Outside, the morning sun was harsh, the supermarket's neon sign buzzing overhead. Jamila walked across the cracked parking lot, past early shoppers who barely noticed her. The air smelled of car exhaust and stale bread from a nearby bakery. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Not here. She thought of Nathan, his promise to handle it, his absence. He had the power to fix this, didn't he? He could have intervened as the owner, but he'd let Thompson act unchecked. Jamila's anger flared, mixed with shame. She'd let herself feel something in that storage room, and now she paid the price. She crossed a dusty street, her steps slowing as she leaned against a fence to catch her breath. Malik's cough, Esther's frail hands, the empty pantry at home. They loomed larger now. Without her job, how would she buy medicine, pay the bills? Her small garden might yield a few dollars, but not enough. The rumors would follow her, tainting her chances at other jobs. She pictured Malik's trusting eyes, Esther's quiet strength, and felt a surge of resolve. She'd find a way, she had to. But as she walked home, the weight of her new reality pressed down heavy, as the morning heat leaving her to face a future stripped bare. Jamila Harris trudged home under the weight of her firing, the morning sun casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. The air smelled of dust and distant gasoline, a sharp reminder of the world moving on without her. Her worn shoes scuffed the ground, each step heavier, with the reality of no income, no stability. Inside her small house, the peeling paint and sagging porch mirrored her unraveling hopes. Malik, her 6-year-old son, played quietly on the floor, pushing a plastic truck across a frayed rug. His faint but persistent cough cut through the silence, twisting Jamila's heart. Esther, her grandmother, sat on the worn couch, her hands knotted with arthritis, her eyes tracking Jamila's tense movements. Jamila knelt beside Malik, forcing a smile as he looked up, his eyes bright, despite his pallor. "Mommy, you're back early," he said, his voice small. She ruffled his hair, avoiding his question. Esther's gaze sharpened, sensing trouble. "How was work?" she asked, her voice thin but steady. Jamila's throat tightened. She couldn't lie, not to Esther, who'd raised her through her hardships. Standing, she met her grandmother's eyes and spoke softly. "I lost the job," she said, her hands trembling. "They fired me today. Something happened. I can't go back." Esther's face tightened, but she nodded, her silence heavy with understanding. The room felt smaller, the walls closing, as Jamila sat beside Malik, pulling him onto her lap. His warmth grounded her, but fear clawed at her chest. Without her supermarket job, there was no steady paycheck, and no way to buy Malik's asthma medicine or keep the lights on. Esther reached out, her hand resting on Jamila's arm. "We'll manage," she said, her voice firm, despite her frailty. "We always have. Remember when I worked the fields back when folks like us weren't welcome in town? We found a way then. You will too." Her words carried the weight of her past stories of picking fruit under harsh sun, enduring slights to feed her family. Jamila nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. She glanced out the window at her small backyard garden, a patch of dry soil where corn and herbs struggled to grow. It was her only hope for income now, but the plants were sparse, battered by a recent storm. She'd tried selling at the local market, but the earnings were meager, a few coins for a handful of corn. Still, she had no choice. "I'll try the market tomorrow," she said, more to herself than Esther. Malik coughed again, a wet sound that made her flinch. His medicine was running low, and the clinic didn't offer credit. She needed money fast. By mid-morning, Jamila walked to the market, a dusty lot where vendors set up rickety stalls. She carried a basket of corn ears and wilted herbs, arranging them neatly on a crate. Passers-by glanced, but moved on, their eyes skimming over her, as they had at the supermarket. A woman bought 2 ears of corn for a few coins, but others shook their heads unimpressed. After hours, Jamila's basket was nearly complete, her pocket holding barely enough for a loaf of bread. Her stomach churned with frustration. She thought of Nathan Carter, his broken promise to protect her job, and his absence leaving her to face the fallout alone. Anger flared, but so did shame. She'd let that kiss happen, and now her family paid the price. As she packed up, a neighbor, Mrs. Ellis, approached her, expression hesitant. She said, "Heard you're looking for work." She paused, glancing away. "But folks are talking, Jamila, about you and the supermarket boss. I can't risk hiring trouble." The words stung, the rumors spreading like wildfire, tainting Jamila's name. She forced a nod, her cheeks burning, and walked away. The market's noise faded behind her, replaced by the echo of her footsteps. She felt trapped, the weight of judgment and poverty pressing down. Back home, Malik's cough worsened, a thick rattle that kept him from playing. Jamila measured out the last of his medicine, her hands shaking. Esther watched, her eyes steady. She said, "You're a strong child," recounting a story of selling homemade preserves to survive lean years. "You've got that guard in your hands, your heart. Use them." Jamila clung to her grandmother's words, but panic simmered beneath her resolve. She stepped outside, checking the garden's dry soil. The corn stalks leaned weak and sparse. It wouldn't be enough, not yet. Malik needed medicine now, and the bills wouldn't wait. As dusk settled, Jamila sat on the porch, her head in her hands, the future a dark, unyielding shadow. She had to find a way for Malik, for Esther, but the path ahead felt impossibly narrow. Jamila Harris stood at her makeshift stall in the dusty market, the morning sun harsh on her shoulders. Her basket held a few ears of corn and wilted herbs from her struggling backyard garden, arranged with care, but drawing little interest. The air smelled of warm earth and overripe produce from nearby vendors, a reminder of her meager offerings. Malik's worsening cough echoed in her mind, each ragged breath a countdown to the last drop of his medicine. Esther's quiet strength at home pushed Jamila to keep trying, but the coins in her pocket, barely enough for a day's bread, mocked her efforts. The rumors from Carter's market clung to her, a shadow that turned neighbors' glances cold. She adjusted the corn, forcing a neutral smile as a passerby paused, then walked on. The market hummed with chatter, but Jamila felt isolated. Her stall was a small island in a sea of indifference. She thought of Nathan Carter, his broken promise to protect her job, his absence after the storage room kiss. Her anger simmered, but so did a flicker of doubt. Had she misjudged him? The memory of his touch, brief and reckless, stirred conflicting emotions. She shook her head, focusing on the present. Malik needed her to find a way, not dwell on mistakes. Something caught her eye. As she rearranged her herbs, a folded piece of paper tucked beneath her crate, her name scrawled in neat ink. Jamila frowned, her pulse quickening. She opened it, the words stark and simple. Jamila, I'm sorry. I know you lost your job. Please meet me at the farm. I want to help. Nathan. Her breath caught anger flaring anew. How had he left this here without her noticing? Why did he think he could fix things now, after leaving her to face the fallout alone? She crumpled the note, shoving it into her pocket, but its weight lingered, a challenge to her pride. Jamila packed her unsold produce, the basket heavier with her failure. She walked home, the dusty road stretching under a relentless sun. Malik greeted her at the door, his cough sharper today, his eyes tired but trusting. Did you sell lots, Mommy? He asked, clutching his plastic truck. Jamila forced a smile, kneeling to hug him. Not today, but soon, she said, her voice steady, despite the ache in her chest. Esther sat on the couch, her hands folded, watching Jamila with knowing eyes. You look troubled, she said, her voice soft but piercing. Jamila pulled the note from her pocket and handed it to Esther. Nathan left this at the market, she said, her tone clipped. Says he wants to help. Esther read it, her expression unreadable, then set it on the table. He's the reason you're in this mess, she said. But he's also got resources. Your drowning child. Malik needs medicine, and that garden ain't enough. Jamila paced the small living room, her hands clenched. I don't trust him, she said. He let me get fired. What if he expects something in return? Esther's eyes softened, recalling her own hard choices. Sometimes you swallow pride to save what matters. Go hear him out. You can walk away if it feels wrong. Jamila looked at Malik, now curled on the rug, his breathing uneven. The medicine bottle sat nearly empty on the counter, a stark reminder of her limits. She thought of the rumors, the neighbor who'd turned her away, the market's indifference. Nathan's note offered a lifeline, but came with strings she couldn't see. Her pride screamed to tear it up, to find another way. But Esther's words echoed, save what matters. She stepped outside, staring at her garden's dry soil, the corn stalks drooping under neglect. The weight of her choice pressed down heavy as the evening heat. She decided to act. Before dawn, Jamila slipped on her sandals, leaving Malik asleep, and Esther stirring on the couch. She didn't tell them where she was going, unsure if she'd return with hope or regret. The walk to Nathan's farm was long, the dirt road flanked by empty fields and sagging fences. Her stomach churned with doubt. Could she trust a man who'd already let her down? The wooden gate loomed ahead, marked with a sign, Carter Farm. Beyond it, fields stretched wide, a world of wealth she'd never touched. She pushed the gate open, her steps hesitant but resolute, driven by Malik's cough and Esther's wisdom. Whatever Nathan offered, she'd face it on her terms, guarding her heart and her family's future. Jamila Harris stood at the edge of Carter Farm, the morning air cool against her skin, carrying the scent of fresh earth and distant hay. The wooden gate creaked behind her as she followed a narrow path toward the main house, its sturdy frame starkly contrasting with her peeling home. Her heart pounded, Nathan Carter's note burning in her pocket. I'm sorry. I want to help. The words felt like a trap, yet Malik's worsening cough and Esther's quiet urging pushed her forward. She needed answers, not promises, and she'd face Nathan on her terms. A farmhand. Miguel emerged behind a barn carrying a toolbox. His weathered face softened as he recognized her. "Looking for Mr. Carter?" he asked, his voice calm. Jamila nodded, her jaw tight. "Is he here?" Miguel pointed toward the back of the house. "Out by the fences working. Go around that way." She thanked him, her steps deliberate as she followed the path. The fields stretched wide rows of green, contrasting with her struggling garden. The sight stirred a mix of envy and resolve. She'd make her way no matter what Nathan offered. Near a wooden fence post, Nathan crouched, adjusting wire with pliers. His shirt was rolled to the elbows, his hands steady but tense. He stood as Jamila approached, his blue eyes widening slightly. "Jamila," he said, setting the pliers down, his voice low but earnest. "You came." She stopped a few feet away, arms crossed, her posture rigid. "I got your note," she said, her tone sharp. "You said you'd help, but I lost my job because of you. People think I tried to use you. No one will hire me now, and my son is sick. You said you'd protect me, but you did nothing." Nathan's face tightened, guilt flickering in his eyes. He stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance. "I tried," he said, his voice steady but strained. "I didn't know Thompson would fire you so fast. By the time I heard it was done, I spoke to him, but he wouldn't budge. He said it was final, and that reversing it would look suspicious." Jamila's eyes narrowed. "You own the store," she said, anger creeping into her voice. "You could have stopped it. You let him decide my life." Nathan shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "I own it, yes, but I don't run the day-to-day. I gave Thompson control to keep things efficient. I didn't expect him to act without consulting me." His explanation felt hollow, but his tone carried weight. Jamila studied him, searching for deception. "Why should I trust you now?" she asked, her voice low. Nathan met her gaze, his expression open. "I messed up," he said. "After my wife died, I buried myself in work and kept my distance from the store. It was easier than facing people facing loss. But seeing you, your strength, your grit, awoke something in me. I crossed a line that night, and I'm sorry. I want to make it right." Jamila's chest tightened, his words stirring anger and reluctant empathy. She thought of Malik's cough, Esther's frail hands, and the empty pantry at home. "My grandmother says I should hear you out," she said, her voice steady but guarded. "I need money for medicine, a way to earn a living. But I'm not taking charity, and I'm not your project. If you're offering something, it's got to be fair, no strings." Nathan nodded, his posture relaxing slightly. He said, "I have a plot of land," gesturing to the fields. "It's yours to farm, no charge. Plant what you want, sell what you grow, keep the money. I'll now give you tools, seeds, and cash for Malik's medicine. You call the shots." Jamila's breath caught relief and suspicion warring within her. A plot of land could mean real income and a chance to rebuild, but trust was hard-earned. "And what do you want in return?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Nathan frowned, his voice firm. "Nothing. I'm not that kind of man. I pushed too far in the storage room, putting you at risk. This is me, fixing my mistake, not buying your gratitude." His sincerity disarmed her, but caution lingered. She remembered the kiss, the warmth of his touch, and the chaos it unleashed. She said that if people see me on your land, they'll talk. They'll say I'm your... whatever. Nathan shrugged, his gaze steady. "Let them. You'll have your plot, your own business. Tell them it's a rental, or tell them to mind their own business. I'm done caring what they think." Jamila considered his words, her mind racing. The offer was a lifeline, but it came from a man whose actions had cost her dearly. She thought of Malik's trusting eyes, Esther's stories of survival. "All right," she said slowly. "I'll take the land, but I'll run it my way. No interference, no favors I didn't ask for." Nathan nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. "Fair enough. I'll have Miguel show you the plot tomorrow. Take the cash for medicine today." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small stack of bills. Jamila hesitated, then took them, her fingers brushing his briefly. "I'll pay you back," she said, her voice firm. "This isn't a gift." Nathan gave a short nod. "Do what you need to. Take care of your family." Jamila turned, clutching the money, and walked back toward the gate. The field stretched around her, full of possibility and risk. She didn't trust Nathan fully, but this was her best chance. For Malik, for Esther, she'd make it work. Jamila Harris stepped onto the small plot of land behind Nathan Carter's barn, the morning sun casting a warm glow over the rough soil. The air smelled of damp earth and budding greenery, starkly contrasting with the sterile supermarket where she'd lost her job. Her hands gripped a rusty hoe, one of several tools Nathan had provided, along with a sack of corn and bean seeds. The plot was modest, scattered with stones and clumps of dry grass, but it was hers to shape. Jamila's shoulders squared with determination. She'd turn this patch into something tangible to sustain Malik and Esther. The weight of Nathan's money, now spent on Malik's medicine, lingered in her mind, but she'd vowed to repay it with her earnings. She knelt, breaking the soil with the hoe, her muscles straining as she cleared stones. Each swing was a step away from the humiliation of her firing the whispers that had followed her. Malik's health had improved, his cough easing. With the medicine she'd bought, a small victory that fueled her resolve. At home, Esther had shared tips from her days tending crops, her voice steady as she recalled planting beans under moonlight to outsmart pests. She said, "You've got the heart for this," her arthritic hands gesturing with pride. Jamila clung to those words, letting them guide her as she worked the unfamiliar earth. Miguel, the farmhand, appeared with a bucket of water, his weathered face kind but reserved. "Need help with the rows?" he asked, setting the bucket down. Jamila nodded, grateful for his offer, but firm in her independence. "She said to show me how to space them," wiping sweat from her brow. Miguel demonstrated his hands deft as he marked lines in the soil. He said, "You're a quick learner," a faint smile breaking through. Jamila returned a tight nod, focusing on the task. She didn't need praise, she required results. The rows took shape, neat and precise, promising growth if she could nurture them. The sun climbed higher, her arms aching as she planted seeds, each a bet on the future. She thought of her backyard garden, which was too small to sustain them, and how this plot could change that. Nathan's offer had been a lifeline, but trust remained elusive. She'd accepted his help on her terms. No control, no debts beyond what she could repay. He kept his distance, his boots occasionally visible near the barn, his presence a quiet acknowledgement rather than interference. Jamila appreciated that though she remained wary, her pride was a shield against relying on him too much. At home, Esther greeted her with a warm nod, Malik playing nearby with his plastic truck. "The medicine's working," Esther said, her eyes bright. "He ate a whole plate today." Jamila's heart lifted, picturing Malik's smile free of coughs. She shared her progress, describing the plot's potential. Esther listened, then recounted a story of selling tomatoes to skeptical neighbors, winning them over with quality. "Folks will come around," she said, her voice firm. "Show them what you're made of." Jamila nodded, her resolve hardening. She'd prove herself not just to Esther, but to the town that whispered her name. In the market, the rumors lingered, but a shift was brewing. A local vendor, Mr. Hayes, had nodded at her yesterday, his usual frown softening when she mentioned her new plot. "Heard you're farming now," he'd said, his tone curious rather than judgmental. It wasn't much, but it hinted at change, a crack in the gossip wall. Jamila returned to the farm each morning, her hands growing calloused, her movements surer. She weeded, watered, and checked the soil's moisture, learning its texture under Miguel's guidance. The work was grueling, but it was honest, free of Thompson's barked orders or the supermarket's cold indifference. By week's end, tiny sprouts pushed through the soil, their green tips a fragile promise. Jamila crouched, touching them gently, her heart swelling with cautious hope. She pictured Malik running through rows of corn, Esther tasting fresh beans from her harvest. Nathan approached one afternoon, hands in his pockets, keeping a respectful distance. "It's coming along," he said, his voice neutral. Jamila stood brushing dirt from her hands. "It's a start," she said, her tone guarded, but not hostile. He nodded, then walked away, leaving her to her work. His restraint reassured her. He wasn't hovering, wasn't demanding gratitude. As she walked home, the sun dipping low, Jamila felt a shift within her. The plot was more than land. It was a chance to rebuild, to stand on her own. Malik's improving health, Esther's stories, and the sprouting seeds anchored her. The rumors still stung, but they lost their edge as her work took root. She wasn't the janitor caught in a scandal anymore. She was a farmer carving a path for her family. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in weeks, Jamila felt the ground steady beneath her feet. The evening sun cast a golden hue over Jamila Harris's plot at Carter Farm, the rows of sprouting corn and beans swaying gently in the breeze. The air carried the rich scent of turned soil and budding leaves, a testament to her weeks of toil. Jamila knelt, weeding carefully around the fragile seedlings, her hands rough but precise. The physical ache of her work felt different now, purposeful, not punishing. Malik's cough had faded, his laughter brighter each day thanks to the medicine she'd bought with Nathan Carter's money. Esther's stories of resilience echoed in her mind, fueling her determination to make this land her own. Yet the shadow of the storage room kiss lingered, an unresolved thread she couldn't ignore. She stood wiping sweat from her brow and noticed Nathan approaching from the barn. His steps were measured, hands in his pockets, his posture careful not to intrude. Near a fence post, he stopped a few feet away, his blue eyes catching the fading light. "The sprouts look strong," he said, his voice calm but deliberate. Jamila nodded, gripping her watering can, her guard still up. "They're getting there," she said, her tone even. Nathan's presence no longer felt threatening, but stirred memories of that reckless moment in the supermarket, the fallout that had upended her life. He shifted his gaze, dropping to the ground. "I've been thinking about what happened," he said, his voice low. "The storage room, the kiss. I owe you more than an apology." Jamila's chest tightened, the memory sharp. His lips, the warmth, the chaos that followed. She set the watering can down, crossing her arms. "It cost me everything," she said, her voice steady, but edged with pain. "My job, my reputation. People still whisper about me." Nathan nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. I let my feelings get ahead of me. I saw your strength, your fire, and I rushed in. I should have stopped it before it started." Jamila studied him, searching for sincerity. His words rang true, but they didn't erase the consequences. She admitted, "I let it happen too," her voice softer now. "I felt something for a moment, but it wasn't worth what came after." Nathan's eyes met hers, a flicker of relief mixed with regret. "I admired you," he said. "Still do, but it was wrong to act on it there, to put you in that spot. I was lonely, carrying my ghosts, and I saw something in you that pulled me in. I didn't think about the cost to you." His honesty disarmed her, stirring a reluctant understanding. She thought of Esther's tales of hard choices, of Malik's smile when she brought home extra food. "We both made a mistake," she said, her tone firm but not harsh. "But I'm not that woman anymore, the one who cleans floors and takes orders. I'm building something here for my family. I don't need complications." Nathan nodded, his expression earnest. "I get that. I'm not asking for anything, friendship, forgiveness, nothing. I want you to have what you need to stand alone. Jamila's shoulders relaxed slightly, the weight of the past easing. The kiss had been a spark born of mutual loneliness, but it didn't define her now. She'd chosen a different path of soil and seeds, not fleeting romance. Thank you, she said, her voice steady. For the land, the start. But this is my work, my life. I need to keep it that way. Nathan gave a slight nod, stepping back. I respect that. You've got my word. I'll stay out of your way, unless you ask for help. His restraint reassured her, a sign he understood her boundaries. She picked up the watering can, turning back to her plot. The sprouts seemed brighter now, a symbol of her control. Nathan walked toward the barn, his silhouette fading into the dusk. Jamila felt lighter, the knot of anger and confusion loosening. The storage room was behind her, its consequences no longer her prison. She thought of Malik's laughter, Esther's quiet pride, and the community's slow-shift neighbors, like Mr. Hayes nodding at her progress. She was carving her own space, not as a janitor or a scandal, but as a farmer with a future. As she poured water over the seedlings, the soil darkening under her care, Jamila felt a quiet strength. She'd faced the past, named it, and let it go. Nathan's support had opened a door, but she was the one walking through her hands, shaping the earth, her heart set on her family. The evening breeze carried a promise of growth, and for the first time, Jamila believed she could build something lasting, free of the shadows that once held her back. Jamila Harris crouched beside her plot at Carter Farm, the morning air crisp with the scent of dew and fresh earth. Rows of corn and beans stood tall, their leaves vibrant under the rising sun. Her hands, now calloused from weeks of toil, gently peeled back a corn husk, revealing firm golden kernels. The sight sparked a quiet pride. She turned a barren patch into a thriving garden. Malik's health was steady, his cough a fading memory thanks to the medicine she'd bought. Esther's encouraging words, woven with stories of her harvests, echoed in Jamila's mind, urging her to keep pushing. Today, she'd harvest her first crop, a step toward independence. She worked carefully, cutting ears of corn and snapping bean pods, placing them in a wooden crate Miguel had brought from the barn. The physical strain felt lighter now, each movement a testament to her growing skill. She'd learned to space seeds, check soil moisture, and fend off pests, guided by Miguel's quiet tips and her resolve. Nathan Carter's support tools, seeds, and a plot of land had given her a start, but this harvest was hers, earned through sweat and determination. She glanced toward the barn, where Nathan's silhouette appeared briefly, his presence distant but reassuring. He'd kept his promise, staying out of her way, offering help only when asked. Jamila carried the crate to a makeshift stand under a tree near the farm's entrance, arranging the corn and beans in neat rows. The stand, a simple plank on crates, was her first real test in the market. Her stomach fluttered with nerves. What if no one came? The rumors from her supermarket firing still lingered, casting a shadow over her name. But she straightened, brushing dirt from her hands, and waited. The sun climbed higher, the air warming, and a farmhand approached, his eyes curious. "Fresh corn?" he asked, picking up an ear. Jamila nodded, her voice steady. "Picked this morning." He bought 4 ears, his nod of approval warming her. Word spread quickly. Another worker bought beans, then a local woman. Mrs. Turner paused at the stand. Jamila recognized her from the market where she'd once turned away, swayed by gossip. "Heard you're farming now," Mrs. Turner said, her tone softer than before. "This looks good." She bought a handful of beans and 2 ears of corn, then hesitated. She said, "I was wrong to believe those rumors," her eyes meeting Jamila's. "You're doing something real here." Jamila's throat tightened, but she managed a nod. "Thank you," she said, pocketing the coins. The small but sincere apology felt like a crack in the town's judgment. By noon, Most of the crate was empty, and the coins in Jamila's pocket were heavier than in any market the day before. She saved a few ears of corn and beans for home, picturing Malik's smile and Esther's pride. On her way back, she stopped at a small store buying fresh apples for Malik and a loaf of bread for Esther, luxuries her garden couldn't yet provide. The money felt different, earned not from scrubbing floors, but from her soil. At home, Malik ran to her, his energy brighter than ever. "You brought fruit," he exclaimed, clutching an apple. Esther smiled from the couch, her hands less shaky today. "You're making it, child," she said, her voice warm. Nathan passed by the stand that afternoon, his hands in his pockets. "You're drawing people," he said, his tone neutral but approving. "Fresh produce always sells." Jamila wiped her hands on her shirt, meeting his gaze. "It's just the start," she said, her confidence growing. "I'll bring more tomorrow." Nathan nodded, his eyes lingering on the empty crate. "He said you're building something tangible," then turned toward the barn, leaving her to her success. His words echoed Mrs. Turner's, but carried no expectation, only acknowledgement. Jamila appreciated his distance. It let her stand on her own. As she packed up, Miguel approached, carrying a spare crate. "Folks are talking about your corn," he said, a grin breaking through. "Might need more crates soon." Jamila smiled, the first genuine one in weeks. The stand, modest as it was, marked her transformation. She wasn't the janitor defined by a scandal anymore. She was a farmer, and her harvest symbolized resilience. Walking home, the weight of her earnings in her pocket, Jamila felt a quiet triumph. She'd faced the town's whispers and turned dirt into possibility. For Malik and Esther, she'd keep going, standing as a beacon of what she could build. The late afternoon sun bathed Carter Farm in a warm glow, casting long shadows across Jamila Harris's plot of thriving corn and bean plants. The air smelled of rich soil and sweet blossoms, a testament to her weeks of relentless work. Jamila stood among the rows, her hands brushing the sturdy stalks, their height a quiet victory. Her stand under the tree had become a steady source of income, and the coins in her pocket were enough to buy Malik's medicine and better food for Esther. The whispers from her supermarket firing had faded, replaced by nods of respect from locals who now sought her produce. Today, she'd invited Malik and Esther to see the plot, a chance to share her progress with those who mattered most. Malik bounded ahead, his plastic truck tucked under his arm, his laughter bright and free of coughs. The medicine had worked. His health was stronger each day, a weight lifted from Jamila's heart. Esther followed slowly, leaning on a cane, her eyes bright with pride despite her aching joints. "Look at all this," Mommy Malik called, darting between the corn rows, his small hands brushing the leaves. Jamila smiled, her chest swelling. "Careful, don't trample them," she said, her voice warm. Esther paused beside a bean plant, her fingers tracing a pod. She said, her voice soft, reminding me of my daddy's fields. "We grew okra and greens, sold them door to door when times were lean. You're doing him proud, Jamila." The words settled deep, connecting Jamila to a legacy of resilience. She knelt beside Malik, showing him how to check a corn ear for ripeness. "See these kernels? They're almost ready," she said, guiding his hand. Malik grinned, his eyes wide. "Can we eat some tonight?" Jamila nodded, ruffling his hair. "We'll cook a big pot with Grandma's recipe." Esther chuckled, sharing a story of sneaking corn from her father's field as a child, her laughter mingling with Malik's. "It's coming along," she said, her tone calm but firm. Nathan didn't linger, returning to the barn, his restraint a silent acknowledgement of her independence. Jamila appreciated it. He'd given her a start, but this was her work, her triumph. She didn't need to explain their complicated history to Malik or Esther. She wanted them to see what she'd built. As the sun dipped lower, Jamila led Malik and Esther to her stand, showing them the crates where she sold her harvest. Malik clapped excited by the neat rows of corn. "It's like a store," he said, his voice bubbling. Esther sat on a stool. Miguel had brought her eyes, tracing the plot. "You've made something real," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is yours, child, not borrowed or begged." Jamila's throat tightened, the weight of her grandmother's words grounding her. She'd lost everything at the supermarket, but she'd reclaimed her strength here. They walked home as dusk settled, Malik holding Jamila's hand, Esther's cane tapping the dirt road. Jamila carried a small bag of fresh beans and corn, planning a simple dinner. The air smelled of cooling earth, the horizon soft with fading light. At home, Malik ran inside, his energy contrasting with the days of coughs and worry. Esther settled on the couch, her smile steady. Jamila cooked, and the scent of boiling corn filled the small house. They ate together, and the meal was a quiet celebration of stability. For the first time, Jamila felt in control, not just surviving, but building a life for her family, rooted in her own hands' work. Jamila Harris woke before dawn, the cool air brushing her face as she stepped onto the porch of her small house. The scent of dew and distant fields grounded her, a reminder of the life she was building. Malik slept soundly inside, breathing steadily free of the coughs that once haunted her nights. Esther stirred on the couch, her quiet presence a constant anchor. Jamila slipped on her worn shoes and walked to Carter Farm, the dusty road familiar under her steady steps. Her plot awaited its rows of corn and beans, now tall and heavy with promise, a testament to her relentless work. The farm was quiet, and the first light painted the fields gold. Jamila knelt beside her plot, inspecting the corn ears. Their kernels are complete and ready for harvest. She worked with care, cutting stalks and snapping pods, filling crates with produce for her stand. The physical ache in her muscles felt like progress, each crate a step toward independence. Her earnings had grown enough to buy Malik new shoes, stock the pantry, and save for emergencies. Esther's health had stabilized, and her arthritis was less painful with better food and rest. The town's whispers had faded, replaced by respect from customers who sought her fresh crops. Jamila carried a crate to her stand, arranging corn and beans in neat piles under the tree. The stand, once a shaky plank, was now a sturdy table, built by Miguel to handle her growing sales. Customers came daily, farmhands, locals, even passers-by, drawn by word of mouth. Mrs. Larson's offer to sell at the town market lingered in Jamila's mind. She'd accepted, planning to expand her reach next season. The thought sparked cautious ambition. Maybe she'd hire help, rent a permanent stall, or grow new crops. The possibilities felt real, not dreams, but plans she could shape. Nathan Carter approached as she set up, his hands in his pockets, his presence unobtrusive. "Your stand's becoming a fixture," he said, his voice calm. "Folks talk about it in town." Jamila nodded, wiping her hands on her shirt. "It's working," she said, her tone steady. "I'm planning to expand and take that extra plot you mentioned." Nathan's eyes lit with approval. "It's yours when you're ready," he said. No rush. He turned toward the barn, leaving her to her work. His support, once a source of suspicion, was now a quiet ally offered without strings. Jamila thought of their conversation weeks ago, the storage room kiss a distant memory. She no longer felt anger toward Nathan. He'd made mistakes, but he'd respected her boundaries, since giving her space to grow. She'd moved beyond that moment. Her life was no longer defined by a scandal, but by the earth she tilled. Miguel passed by carrying a watering can and nodded. He said, "Your crops are stronger than half the farms," a grin breaking through. Jamila smiled, her confidence solidifying. The farm was her proving ground, each sprout a marker of her strength. At home, Malik greeted her with a hug, his energy boundless, as he showed her a drawing of her stand, cornstalks towering in crayon. Esther sat at the kitchen table, her hands steadier as she peeled a potato. "You're calmer now," she said, her voice warm. "Like you found your place." Jamila nodded, setting the bag of fresh beans on the counter. "I'm not rich, but I'm stable," she said. "I can feed us, save a bit, and keep Malik healthy." Esther's smile widened. "That's all I wanted for you, a way forward." Dinner was a simple feast, boiled corned beans and bread, the flavors rich with Jamila's harvest. Malik ate with gusto, his laughter filling the small house. Esther shared a story of her first market sale, her voice light with memory. Jamila listened, her heart full. She'd rebuilt her life from nothing, turning loss into growth. The supermarket's harsh lights. Thompson's cold dismissal. The rumors all were shadows, now overtaken by her plot's green rose. Nathan's help had opened a door, but she'd walked through it, her hands shaping her future. As night fell, Jamila sat by the window, the darkness soft outside. She pictured her plot, the produce crates, and the coins in her pocket. She saw Malik running free, Esther's steady gaze, and a horizon of possibilities more. Land a market stall, a legacy for her son. She was no longer trapped, the janitor defined by a mistake. She was a farmer, her roots deep in the soil she'd claimed. Climbing into bed, the gentle ache of her day's work lulled her. Tomorrow she'd rise and do it again, building a life that was hers for her family step by step.